It is time to wrap up the first week of our SEC previews, and we are doing that this evening with the Vanderbilt Commodores, who got back to a bowl game last season for the first time since 2019. It has been a real disastrous road for Vanderbilt up until last year, and Diego Pavia is coming back for another year up there in Nashville. How will the Vanderbilt Commodores do in 2025? Chris Lee of Vandy 247 joins us on this edition of the Stingray Show for the Vanderbilt Sports Preview Show of college football.
Hi, this is Tim Brando with a reminder. Those of you on Tide 100.9, look out. You're about to feel the buzz of Stingray.
And with that, we want to welcome you inside the Vanderbilt Football Preview Show for 2025 inside the Stingray Show. And last year, Vanderbilt went back to a bowl game, like I said off the top of the show, for the first time since 2019 with a record of 7-6. It was a winning season, and since the COVID year, here are the records for the Vanderbilt Commodores: 0-9 in 20, in 21, 2-10 in 2022, 5-7 in 2023, 2-10, and then last year 7-6. And along the way last year, they upset Virginia Tech at home and then beat Alabama for the first time since the 1980s. How will they do this year? Heath, briefly give us your thoughts on Diego Pavia coming back for another season at Vanderbilt.
No one saw it. Everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they can replicate that again this year. I think they're going to have much more success, but also I think a lot of people are going to be heavily prepared for Vanderbilt. And that's something that hasn't always been the case. So I think it's kind of a give and take. I think they've added some things to the roster, and it's going to be tough. But you know what? Vanderbilt believes. And so that's the biggest difference. Not only do the guys on the field believe, the coaching staff, but the folks sitting in the stands. The kids going to class, they all believe. So with that, I mean, you can do anything when you start believing in yourself.
Heath, let me briefly, before we bring on Chris Lee, let me say this. Last year, they were the hunter because they knocked off Virginia Tech and they knocked off Alabama. It's not going to be very easy because both of those teams this year have that game circled, and Vanderbilt becomes the hunted this year.
Oh, yeah, very easily. And so, and that's what I was talking about. They're not going to sneak up on anybody. Everyone knows what they got, and they know that Diego is dangerous, and they're going to come in prepared. But at the same time, Diego's just one of 11. There's 10 other guys, and you've got to pay attention. Looking for a big season out of Eli Stowers.
All right. So to break down the Vanderbilt season, let's go on ahead and bring on from Vandy 247 and then the owner of Southeastern 16, our good friend Chris Lee, who comes to us right outside of Nashville. Chris, how are things with you? And go ahead and talk about the hype going into this season for Vanderbilt after coming off of a winning season last year.
Yeah, well, thank you first for having me. Second, I guess hype depends on where you look. I think a lot of people figure they're going to go back to closer to what they were before. I think the Vegas over-under on wins is 4.5. I think the outlook locally is a lot different. I think 6 wins feels reasonable again. I think you can argue for more. And so I think it depends on where you're looking in terms of the hype. Certainly the Netflix special in which they were featured prominently is going to drive that a little bit more. But, you know, speaking in real terms, I do think it is and I think Heath talked about it, kind of an interesting thing. Like, was there drop off last year, second half of the season? Was it because people figured them out? Is that something you can carry forward into the season as an expectation? or was it because of other things? I can unpack that a little bit if you like, but certainly expectations, I think, are very different depending on where you look for them.
Chris, we have not done this so far on the preview shows, but last year was so unprecedented for Vanderbilt. Briefly recap the 24 season for us and Vanderbilt going 7-6.
Well, they started off with that win over Virginia Tech, which was unexpected. I think they were about a 6 to 7 point underdog. And then it all kind of came crashing down to earth when a couple of weeks later they lost to Georgia State. And I thought, well, Here we go. Same old Vanderbilt. Well, they almost beat Missouri. They lose that one in overtime, and then they shock Alabama. I think from that point on, the offense ran out of steam. I think that had a lot to do with Diego Pavia's health. He talked about Deion Walker falling on him in the Kentucky game the next week. Their offensive numbers went markedly down the rest of the year. He revealed after the season he'd played, the second half of the season with the partially torn hamstring, which I don't know how you play on that. And then he finally had a month to get healthy, and in the bowl game he looked more like he looked before that. Accounted for 5 touchdowns, and they got a win over a pretty good Virginia Tech team. So I think, to me, last year it was amazing. When their offense started to falter, their defense kept them in games. They beat Auburn. They had an onside kick against Texas in the last 2 minutes. If it goes their way, they've got a chance to tie Texas or even win with a 2-point conversion and a touchdown. So, where their offense faltered, their defense kept them in it. And I think that balance there makes them, again, interesting for this year.
Chris, looking at this Vanderbilt offense, if you had to guess right now, do they finish in the top half of the SEC or the bottom half of the SEC? I was shocked when I was going over team offensive numbers and team passing that Vanderbilt was ranked toward the bottom last year. And that overly shocked me when I saw it because they had such a good season. But, total offense, they were a little bit higher up there. But where does this offense going to rank at the end of the season if everyone stays healthy?
Probably more towards middle lower of the pack. It's not a team that's going to just rack up huge offensive numbers. They're going to run a lower number of plays. They're going to run more clock. So like the total offense numbers won't be great. Now they do need to get their per play numbers up a little bit, but I think they'll be a little better. They've got a better offensive line. However long that takes them to gel, I think will determine a lot. They've got to run the ball better. I don't think they're a great offensive team. I don't think they're a poor offensive team. But I think they were an opportunistic offensive team a year ago because I think they had the 6 turnovers, which I think was the least in the country. That'll be an emphasis again. I don't think they can repeat that. But if you can be careful with the ball and not shoot yourself in the foot, that was part of their recipe for victory a year ago. I think their hope is they'll force more turnovers defensively, which will help some other stuff. But, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird deal. I don't see them being really good or really bad, but I see them having a formula that they stick with that works, and I think that's what they'll do again this year.
So, Chris, hold that thought. We are up against our first break, and when we come back, we are going to dive into the offense a little bit more and then get to the defense. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Stingray Show. We will be right back on the Vanderbilt Preview Show. Welcome back inside the Vanderbilt Preview Show. My guest this evening is Chris Lee of Southeastern 16 and of Vandy 247, and we're discussing the Vanderbilt Preview Show. And before the break, we were talking about the surprise season last year for the Vanderbilt Commodores. And Chris, you cover Vanderbilt on a regular basis. When we go to the quarterback position and Diego Pavia, where would you like to see him take the next step as a quarterback this season?
Well, I'd like to see him take the next step by not carrying the ball as much. I mean, he was really good at it, but it was like, 190 carries, give or take a few. Probably had a lot to do with why he got hurt, that in his offensive line, which wasn't very good, which I think will be better. I think, to me, really, there's not a lot that you would ask him realistically to do better than he did a year ago. Again, he was careful with the ball. He didn't fumble it. He didn't throw interceptions. I just think they're going to have to get other guys to step up and maybe do some of the running that he was doing, I don't think you would change a thing about Diego Pavia. I think you just would like to ask his surrounding cast to pick up some of the load that he took a year ago.
Chris, I'm sitting here looking at the schedule for Vanderbilt, and you start off the season with CSU at home, then you're at Virginia Tech, at South Carolina, back home against Georgia State, then Utah State, and your other non-conference. That's all your non-conferences, or those, excuse me. With that being said, let's just say Vanderbilt can go 4-0 in those non-conference games. Where do you think they can get those last, at least two more, to make it bowl eligible this year?
Well, I think they're most likely ones. Kentucky. I don't know that I've seen anybody pick them behind Kentucky yet. They've won that one last year and two of the last three. That one's at home. I think Auburn, that's at home. You know, they beat them a year ago, and that was with Diego Pavia hobbled. I think that's one that you circle that's gettable. I think Missouri at home. I think Missouri's better than people think, but it's gettable. Yeah, I don't think they're going to beat South Carolina early in the year. They haven't won that game, I think, since 2008. But if you're going to catch the Gamecocks, you want to catch them early. So that helps them. Look, I don't think they're going to Tuscaloosa and winning this year.
No.
And I don't think they're beating LSU at home. I think LSU is just too much. But I think Missouri at home, winnable. Again, I think they're better than you think, but winnable. Took them to overtime a year ago. And then I think Tennessee and Knoxville. Depending on what happens with Tennessee between now and then. I mean, they got quarterback questions. They had a personnel issue with Boo Carter. I don't see the playmakers like they've had in past years. So a lot of time between now and Thanksgiving. But, I mean, there's not a lot of games that are slam dunks for them either, but especially based on what they did a year ago. Like, you know, LSU and Texas, games that you wouldn't think are winnable, but games they had a shot to win in the final 2 to 3 minutes. So I don't think you can cross off a lot of games as they absolutely can't do it either.
So, Chris, you talked about it just a second ago, some of the help for Diego Pavia, and let's start with the running backs. How does that room look for the Vanderbilt Commodores in 2025?
Well, that's their weakest room on the team. And Clark Lee kind of called them out recently in practice. I think that is hands down their biggest question mark. They've got to get more out of Cedric Alexander or A.J. Newberry or whoever takes that load. Now, look, I think they get some of that back. They've got a kid, it's a track star JUCO recruit named Trey Richardson who can just flat out fly out of the slot. He's their fastest player on the team. He carried the ball 30-something times a year ago. I think might carry the ball 20 or 30-something times at Vanderbilt. I think you can sort of offset some of the running back room concerns with some of those things. And again, maybe by keeping Pavia healthier to when he does run, the runs go a little bit longer. But it is absolutely my biggest concern after seeing them about a week and a half into fall camp.
Where did Vanderbilt improve this offense through the transfer portal?
Offensive line. That's hands down number one. They are the oldest team in the country, the most experienced team in the country, according to Phil Steele.
Old wins.
Old does win, and I think that's where people may be sleeping on them. I'm trying to pull it up in front of me, but they've got so many guys on this team that are high school. Diego Pavia was high school class of 2020. They got a lot of kids on this team that are class of 21 and 22. You know, 22 would be your typical fourth-year senior. 21 would be your fifth-year seniors. They've got a lot of that on the offensive line. I think I'm just going to eyeball the depth chart and make sure I'm right. I think all their offensive linemen have started at least 20 games before. And I think they've all played in at least 30. And so, that was maybe the weakest area on the team a year ago, the offensive line. They've got one returning player in Chase Mitchell, who they're moving from tackle to guard, where he's a better fit. They've got a terrific center in Jordan White, who's going to be one of the best in the league, who transferred from Liberty, super smart, did everything asked of him in the spring. Bryce Henderson has struggled a little bit on the right side, but they do strong side and quick side tackles, not left and right. But he's 6'8", 330, 340. I can't tell you the last time they had a tackle that size. So I think that's where you look in terms of one reason the outlook for this team internally is better is I think there's no doubt they've improved their offensive line. Now, look, it may take a little time to get better and gel. We'll have to see about that because it is a lot of new faces. But I think that to me is one of the game changers. They got, I would say they've added a little bit of depth at defensive back. They had a couple of transfers from FCS levels last year that would have maybe started at corner for them. Both of them missed the entire season with health concerns. I think they'll get at least one of those back, but he may have been passed over in the secondary. They had a couple of pieces inside on the defensive line for depth. So I think the trenches is where you start, but I do think they helped themselves at the portal in multiple spots. And again, don't forget Trey Richardson, the JUCO slot guy, because he's going to be a big playmaker for them too.
You said it and answered it with me not even asking the question, depth. You talked about a couple of guys have already been passed over, and that's always kind of been the knock on Vanderbilt. Like, hey, you don't want to play Vandy early in the season because, they're running on full strength 4, 5, 6 games into the season, a little dinged up, 8th, 9th, 10th game of the season. They're just trying to finish the season. So the depth has been developed a little bit more than last year, correct?
Oh yeah, hands down. I mean, they're 2-3 deep at a lot of spots. So look, it's not Alabama and LSU 2 and 3 deep,
right?
So let's not pretend that it is. But this is hands down the deepest team they've had since James Franklin was there. No, that doesn't guarantee you anything. A lot of these guys are new guys. A lot of them played at lower levels, or even outside the SEC. In the Big 12, it's going to be a step up in competition. But on paper, they're a whole lot deeper than they've been in a while. We'll see how it translates, but I think that helps them a lot.
So, Chris, hold that thought. We're up against another break, and when we come back, we are going to dive into the wide receivers, the defense, and then, of course, the schedule. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Stingray Show. We will return on the Vandy Preview Show right after this. Welcome back inside the Vanderbilt Preview Show. Our guest this evening is Chris Lee of Vandy 247 and Southeastern 16. And before the break, we were talking about running backs and quarterback Diego Pavia. Now, Chris, let's move to the wide receiver position, and he has a big tight end coming back as well to throw to. But what do the receivers look like this year for Vanderbilt?
That's another room that I think on paper has been a concern. They've got Junior Sherrill, who's a good one. Not a great one, but a good one. That's a good starting point. I mentioned Trey Richardson, who will operate out of the slot and will absolutely be an impact player based on what we've seen of him in camp. They moved Martell Height. Well, they didn't move him, but he's their top corner. He's been playing on offense some too. And in the brief glimpses I've seen of him in camp, he's been uncoverable. Now, I don't know if that's an indictment on the defensive backs or what, but that gives them a dimension of a downfield playmaker if they choose to use him there that they haven't had. You throw in Eli Stowers, who's a tight end, but he catches a ton of balls. You kind of mitigate your weakness there a little bit. I think you put those 4 on the field at the same time, and the offense looks a lot different. It gets a lot faster. Like, they didn't have a lot of speed a year ago on offense at those positions. Again, I don't know if you use Height more on offense, you're losing your best corner some on defense potentially. So I don't know how that trade-off works, but they've got some potential answers there, 2 of them in particular that they didn't have a year ago. And I think that will help them a lot.
Chris, at the end of the season, stat-wise, and everything's different, but who do you think are 3 guys that will stand out on this offense not named Diego Pavia?
Well, Eli Stowers is the easy one. A lot of people consider him the best tight end in the country. I think Trey Richardson is going to stand out. He had almost 1,300 yards last year in JUCO between rushing and receiving. He's a 10-something 100-meter guy, ran JUCO track and was a star there. I think that's another one. And I think Junior Sherrill's a good player. Had almost 500 yards receiving last year. Caught that, I guess the biggest touchdown they probably had against Alabama on that 4th and 1 where he sprung open deep. He's a good ball player for them. I think that's probably the 3 that I would circle is your top players at the skill positions not named Diego Pavia.
Chris, you mentioned it when we brought you on that the offense struggled down the stretch and the defense kept them in games last year. How does the defense look for Vanderbilt in 2025?
Well, one, it's a lot deeper. Again, we won't rewind all that, but I think you can look at a lot of spots, and they're better at the 2 and 3 deep than they've been in a while. Again, not Alabama depth, not LSU depth, but for Vanderbilt, much better depth. I'll circle linebackers, a position to focus. Langston Patterson, Ryan Longwell, and Raymond Fontaine, who plays that star position. It's a hybrid linebacker safety. I've seen all three of those guys get listed on somebody's All SEC team. It's like no, that might be a third or fourth team if Phil Steele or Athlon, but they made it. So when you got three linebackers that are getting All SEC consideration, I think that's a good thing. And they got guys behind them. Bryce Cowan might be more talented than any of them. He's a safety from high school who's learned to play linebacker and made some big plays. Prince Colley, who's a second or third team linebacker, only kid on the team that was a 5-star recruit by any service at any point. Transferred from Notre Dame, played a little bit last year. So that's a place where you look at, say, they've got some good front end guys and some depth. So I think, now they got to replace both starting safeties. And they've got some experience returning there, but that'll be a question mark. But again, I think that they are deeper than they've been in a while, and we'll see how that shows up. Their defense last year, I think the Pavia story trends, just overshadowed everything. But man, they shaved. Gosh, they gave up 35 points a game 2 years ago, and they shaved that to 24 last year.
That's very impressive. 11 points is huge.
And they get most of those guys back. So again, on paper, it feels like they're better. We'll wait and see.
Chris, I'll repeat the question, just change one word. In the transfer portal, where did this defense make the biggest upgrade?
I don't think one name stands out. I would say, Marlon Jones can help them. He was like an FCS All-American a couple of years ago at Eastern Washington, picked off 4 passes. That's a place, if they need more corner depth, I could see him stepping up and starting. Again, he was on the roster last year after transferring in, but had to sit out all last year with that injury. Actually, it was cancer, I believe. It wasn't an injury. So not often you see that. I think a place you want to see them get help is getting Keanu Coate off the edge. He was a top 100 recruit at Alabama, but he's just been so. He hasn't looked like the difference maker that he was advertised to be out of high school. That's one that, you get him. You get Aaron Bryant from Texas, who played a little bit for Texas last year at the defensive line. Vanderbilt doesn't typically bring in guys that played a little bit at Texas and Alabama, but it did in both those spots. Those are names that you'll circle, but really their approach in the portal, it's more of a Moneyball thing. They're not going to go head to head against Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee for the guys they are dying to have, but it's getting guys who can back up or maybe be a sneaky good starter. That's kind of what they did across the ball.
So, Chris, let's go on ahead now and navigate the schedule. They've got Virginia Tech again. They've got Georgia State that shocked them last year, and they've got to come to Alabama. Oh, and they add LSU coming to Nashville. Give us your thoughts on the schedule, please.
Well, I think the key thing is you want to get through the first 5 games 4-1. Now, that would probably look like beating Virginia Tech on the road. They're going to be an underdog there. I don't really completely understand that. I look on paper, I think Vanderbilt's the better team, but we'll see. You either get that one or South Carolina, and you're probably 4-1 out of the chute if you don't stump your foot against Charleston Southern, Georgia State, or Utah State, and then it gets tough. Alabama bye week, LSU at home, Missouri at home, Texas on the road. And then it gets a little bit more winnable. Auburn at home, off game, Kentucky at home, and then Tennessee on the road. Again, a lot of that depends on what Tennessee has. And I think they're the biggest mystery team in the SEC right now, a lot of that because of the quarterback position. But again, I will say this. There's a lot of games on this schedule that based on what they did last year, you can't say they absolutely can't win. But as the Georgia State game proved a year ago, not a lot of teams that you can say are just given, guaranteed wins either.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the schedule, good and bad, what's one game Vanderbilt just can't afford to drop in non-conference?
Well, I mean, you can't afford to. They're probably going to be double-digit favorites in 3 of them. You can't afford to drop one of those. But I think that Virginia Tech game week 2 is really key. That's in Blacksburg. You lose that one. I'm not saying they can't get to a bowl, because you would have said there's no way Vandy's winning 7 games last year after it lost to Georgia State. But the path gets a lot harder, because I think if you're putting Virginia Tech on their schedule and ranking them in terms of how good their Power 4 opponents are, I would have to say they're better than Kentucky. But everybody else on the schedule in the SEC, I think, is a better team than Virginia Tech. So I think that's a big one that they really doesn't wreck the season if they lose it, but it makes it a lot harder to get where they want to get if they don't win it.
Yeah.
So, Chris, we were talking off the air about Vanderbilt has not had back-to-back winning seasons since the James Franklin era. And before that, back in the 1950s, last year they went 7-6. That is a winning season. Do you have Vanderbilt going back-to-back winning seasons?
I do. I'm not extremely confident about it, but if you had to make me pick, I would go there. Again, they showed last year that they could compete with teams they had no business competing with. They are a better team. They're a confident team. I think this is a big year for them, guys, because I just talked about all that experience that they have on this team. Again, that they are, according to Phil Steele, the most experienced team in the country. Well, what happens to experienced and old guys? Allegedly, they eventually have to leave college. I don't always know anymore after Diego Pavia got a 6th year. But all kidding aside, this feels like next year feels like a gigantic rebuild for them potentially. So I think that there's a lot riding on this season.
Hey, did the judge ever rule for next year? I know they gave Diego back 1 junior college year. Are they going to give him the second one?
I don't know. I think that's a separate case they would have to bring the last I checked. But I think, and I don't know if how all the offseason rulings, because, guys didn't get those extra years like they were getting earlier. So, yeah, we'll wait and see.
Okay.
And Chris, to wrap it up, a fun question for the Vanderbilt donors. How is the new renovation going of the stadium up there, and does it look nice?
Well, it's going slowly.
Okay.
They're still hammering stuff in. I don't know how they're going to get everything done in that other end zone before the season, but I thought that last year too, and they got enough done on the outside. So it looks much different, guys. You walk in that stadium, the vibe is completely different. Now, it's a little bit weird because the in-between hasn't been touched. It's still that same old bowl that they've had for 45 years. It's drab and drab and mildly depressing, but boy, the end zones are pretty spectacular. The place is going to have a much different look, just a much different feel around Vanderbilt football, especially with fans having a little bit to be excited about coming into this year.
And Chris, this defense for Vanderbilt, is it going to finish in the top half or the bottom half of the SEC?
Middle-ish, I think.
Okay.
Probably middle to middle bottom. And here's one thing we didn't talk about, guys. They don't pop up in all those stats, but 2 things that again, they don't turn the ball over. So that mitigates a little bit of the yardage stats, and they are outstanding on special teams. You could have argued they were the best special teams team in the country a year ago. They bring back their kicker, who was terrific. He had 5 or 6 field goals over 50 yards. I don't think missed one. I don't think he missed a kick the last half of the season. They're always good at punter. They're not as good as they have been. And they've got 2 return men, punt and kickoffs, who both scored touchdowns a year ago and got some preseason All-SEC love. So that's one spot that I don't think, when you're looking at them saying they're going to be better, I don't think it's going to be a defense or an offense that light up the scoreboard and maybe finish top third of the league. But I just think they are a team that gets it done in so many other ways, and they don't shoot themselves in the foot. That's where I think you probably, if you want to get an accurate read on who they are, I would look at those things rather than just the yards.
So, Chris, any final words that you would like to say about the Vanderbilt Commodores before we let you go?
No, I just think it's going to be a fun season to watch. I think, again, most weeks, once you get past some of those non-conference games, I think they've got a chance to play anybody interestingly. Now, Alabama and Tuscaloosa, they could have a buzzsaw waiting for them there, but maybe not. I mean, they've been a pretty confident team, and they played pretty well on the road, too. I just think when you turn on the TV on Saturdays, usually with Vanderbilt, it's like, okay, they got no chance and they're not going to win the game. It's a much different outlook coming into the season, and I think they got a chance to make most of their fall Saturdays pretty interesting one way or the other.
So, Chris, look, man, thank you as always. Go and enjoy covering the scrimmage and all for the Vanderbilt Commodores, and we would love to catch up with you during the season to talk SEC football with you from Southeastern 16.
You bet. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Chris,
you.
take care, brother.
You too, man. Hope your luck gets a little better.
And Chris, let me also say this. Hey, Chris, let me also say this to you walking out the door. Anchor down. Let's go.
It'll be fun. Thank you, guys.
Be good, Chris.
So on that note, we are going to sign off on the first week of SEC preview shows. This week, we did Mississippi State, we did Kentucky, we did Oklahoma, and we did Auburn and Vanderbilt. Next week on Monday, we're going to start off the week with the Arkansas Razorbacks and how they're going to do in Sam Pittman's 6th year at Arkansas. How will they do, and can he get off the hot seat? We will dive into Arkansas Monday evening at 6 p.m. Everybody have a wonderful weekend out there. Enjoy it, because college football is just around the corner, and we will catch you on Monday with the Woo Pig Suey Arkansas preview show. And Heath, that's going to put a wrap on the Vanderbilt preview show, and hopefully Vanderbilt can have another winning season for the first time in a very long time and get back to another bowl game.
I love saying it every year. I will probably say it for every show until kickoff. This is talking season. Everyone has hope. Everyone is undefeated. Everybody doesn't know about the crap storm they're about to walk into with injuries and bad coaching decisions and, players protesting because they didn't get enough money and leaving the team. Remember that quarterback last year for UNLV? He was like, everyone was praising him and talking about how awesome he was and he could be a Heisman hopeful. And he was like, you ain't paying me, I ain't playing. And what did UNLV do? Win 10 games without him.
Yeah.
Bye.
So, Heath, we will catch you on Monday evening with another SEC preview show, and that will be Arkansas.
Looking forward to it.
Heath, we're all over the place, man. It is Friday. It is Wild Friday. We got to get out of here, man.
You don't have to twist my arm, brother.